This is Spreadsheets Standard 3. We're going to look at some formatting and some layout options. So one of the first things we're going to look at is our headers and footers. We're going to go to the Insert tab because we're inserting something. And it is in the text group because the header and footer will be a piece of text. So click on the button for the header and footer. And I have 3 columns here for headers. If I scroll down, I have 3 columns here for footers. And I've clicked off of that, so I lost my contextual menu that typically appears up here. So I click on the header, and there's my header and footer tools. I have some predefined options here. I'm just going to pull down the first one on the header, and maybe I want to put down, this is Q1 here. So let's give it a second. It finds that. Maybe down in the bottom corner. Let's add a footer down here. Let's go back to my contextual menu, find the footer options. Maybe I just want to put a page number instead. Okay, so put a page number here, and over on this one I want to put the file name. So when I'm done, I have all this information that's available for me here, and it's going to appear on every single sheet. At this point, these are grayed out because there's no data going to appear on these sheets. As I make my spreadsheet bigger and have more sheets, it would make that appear. So I'm done with this view, and this is a view I'm not particularly fond of just because I don't like the fact that the cells don't flow back and forth. So I'm going to come down to my bottom right hand corner, and this is my page layout button. Next to it on the left is the normal view, and when I click that, that is going to take me back into my regular view that I'm used to seeing. Let's look at some text formatting. I've added a header here to our table. It's the widget company sales report, and it is in cell A1. It looks like it's also in B1 and C1 and D1. It's really not. What happens is, as long as I've got space to the right of this cell, it's going to bleed over into my next cell here. So maybe I need to put Q1 here. So I put Q1, and what's going to happen is it's going to overwrite now because it actually resides in D1 and the rest of this doesn't. So I'm going to have to change this. Let's click on this, and I have some text options here. I'm back in my Home tab. I can wrap my text. So let's grab the wrap text. And when I click that, it's going to get to the end of the cell, and it's going to wrap that text for me, and it's going to make it fit. I can widen the cell a little bit, and it's going to fit a little bit better, but we have our height problem here, so we'll come back to fixing this. You can kind of see what we've done right there. So that's one option. You can wrap your text. I've done Control-Z a couple of times to get rid of the things I just did so I can show you. The next I want to do is I want to merge and center these cells. So I'm going to highlight this cell, the A1, where it lives, and I'm going to go all across the range where I want it to be. And I currently have 4 cells, but if I go to my alignment group and I come down to merge and center, I'm going to merge and center this across the cells. What I've done, I've effectively eliminated the lines between B and C and D and A and B. This is considered to be one big cell here. So you see the whole thing now is what's highlighted. So I've been able to merge it, and it makes it so that it will just fit in that one cell. I can unmerge them, and it goes back to this, but it still thinks it's centered. So I'm losing off the left-hand side of my sheet here the widget company sales report. So I'm going to uncenter it, and there that brings that back. So as you're playing with titles, you'll want to be able to merge them across things and maybe take that back. So if you're losing something, check to make sure you haven't still got it centered. I briefly touched on cell alignment of the text. So again, the centering puts this here. I can do the same sort of centering here for my alignment, make these maybe line up a little bit better. I want Bob, Carol, Ted, and Alice maybe on the right-hand side. So I'm going to use the align right, make those fit up a little bit tighter. And let's just merge this one more time. So now my report looks a little bit better. If I needed to add a row, I'm going to just click on row number 2, and I can hit a Control+ on my keyboard, and that's going to throw another row in there for me. There's one more thing I want to show you here in the formatting of your text. I'm going to come over here to the dialog box launcher in the alignment group. When I do this, it gives me some more options. In this particular case, I'm just going to angle it up a little bit, maybe go up 15 degrees. When I click OK, you can see it's starting to angle off. You will need to adjust your height. We'll get that adjusted a little bit. And then we've got this little angle here. So if you ever need to change that, we could go all the way and go up 90 degrees if you wanted to change it. But for right now, we just have that 15 degrees on here. All right, let's look at number formatting. I've just placed the number 5 here in cell G4. I have some different options here. Excel is going to default to general unless it thinks you're trying to do something else. So I do have some options here. I can pull this down and we can make it currency. When I do that, it's going to put the decimals in there for me. It's going to put the dollar sign. Maybe I want to tell it's a percentage. Remember that 1 is 100%, so this is going to turn into 500%. If it's a big number, I can put in comma styles. So let's instead change this back to a general and make this 5,000. If I like having the commas in there so I can see, that kind of helps me read that is 5,000. That's helpful when your numbers get a little bit bigger. And maybe I need fewer decimals or more decimals, so I can just click and add for that different level of precision. So let's get down and just make that with no decimals. The last thing I can do, since this is 5,000, I can come down here, I can grab the date. That is September 8th, 1913. That means that the date started January 1st, 1901, and so we are now 5,000 days into the 20th century. So Excel, when it sees that, it tries to treat it like a date. Another thing Excel does with dates is if I were to put September 5th, it's going to try to put this dash in here for me. It's trying to keep all the dates consistent for me. You may hate that like I do. You can change this. Let's go into some more number formats, and I can choose the date how I want it to be. So if I go month, day, year, there we go. It's 9/5/2018. Come back here, I can change it. Maybe I don't want it to say that there. Maybe I just want it to say September 5th. And it's going to try to do this for me. There's a way around that. If you put a single quote, and then you can type what you would like, it's going to tell Excel to ignore that it thinks it's a date, and it's going to treat it just like text. So now it just says September 5, and that was what I wanted. So there are some other options like I showed you here in the dialog box. Scientific, treat it as text, accounting, date, time. So a lot of things you can do with it if it's not the format that you are wanting. I've gone back to our table. I want to try to make this a little bit easier to visually read at a glance. So I'm going to go into my Styles group on the Home tab and pull down some conditional formatting. Now I have some options here. I can put some data bars in here. Let's just start with the green one. And when I do this, you can see what I'm getting is it's just giving me a ratio. It's showing me that Bob in January has 1, but in March he has 4, and so it fills in more of that particular cell with the bar. I can do the same thing with colors. I can grab colors here, so red is the highest. Let's flip it, maybe. There we go. Green is the highest, and red is the one we've got to worry about. So now you can see that 4 is great, 2 is about the average, so nothing's special about that and highlighted, but the 2 ones are in red, and they're being highlighted for us. We could also add some icons. So if I wanted to put some arrows in here, I need to select everything first, though. Let's try that, shall we? Select everything. Go to my conditional formatting, and let's grab some arrows. And you can see that we've placed these in here. Now you can see that 3 is okay, 2 is okay, 1 is down, and 4 is up. So you can play with your conditional formatting in that way. There's one more rule I want to show you here. It is some highlighting the text. So to highlight the text, I undid the last couple of things we did. Let's go to conditional formatting, and we're going to go to the highlight cells rules. And so I'm going to make it so anytime my value is greater than 3, I want that to appear as something in green. So greater than 3, pull this down again. I want to fill it with the dark green text. So anything that's greater than 3 is going to be like this. So this would work consistently throughout the rest of it. If I change this to 4, it's going to say, hey, I'm going to pick up this highlighting rule and let me know that that's a value that's one that I want to take a look at. Okay, now let's look at copying and moving some things around in our data. The simplest would be just to grab this whole table here, and I can either right-click, and I can make a copy that way, or I could use my keyboard shortcut. I'm going to use a Control C. Either way, when I do that, it's going to give me these marching ants in the line all around here. I've now made a copy of this. It's on my keyboard, and so I can place it someplace else. So I'm going to come over here to F and click in here. I'm going to right click, and I have some options. I could paste just this as it is. I could paste just the values, and so it's going to take away my formatting. We don't have the colors that show up in green. I don't have the highlighted conditional formatting. I could just paste down the formulas if I were starting the year over and I had created some ways to calculate percentages and other things. I could copy just those formulas down for me. I could transpose it. If I had a single line, instead of it being, oh, it did it right there. So instead of it being Bob, Carol, Ted, and Alice down the left-hand side, it's placed it across my top here. I could just do the formatting, or I could paste a link to it. Links are kind of nice because if I click this here, you can see where I was playing with my numbers earlier on this sheet. Let's go back into my formatting and make it back to general. Make this a little bit smaller. So Excel remembers what I've done for good and bad. So this is just a link to the things I have here. So if I were to change Bob's number over here in B4, let's change him to 5, it's just a link. It's pointing me back to this cell right here. And as I read my cell values up here in my format bar, you can see it's just simply a link to B4. This is a link to B5, C4. So that's some of the different ways that we have that we can move things around. If I needed to, I could highlight the whole area, and I can just grab the edge and I can drag these someplace else. That's another way that we have to move things in Excel. And finally, we'll talk about deleting. I can, again, just highlight something I'd like. I can either right-click and I can delete that, or I can hit my delete key. Since I've already got my mouse clicked, I have to do it this way. It's asking me, do you want to shift the cells to the left up, move them over to the left? Let's just shift everything to the left, so it's going to clean that out for us. I could also take out a row. I showed you putting in a row earlier with a Control plus. That would put that here. I can do a Control minus on that row, and it will take out, maybe Ted left the company and he's no longer with us. But I'm going to Control Z just to bring him back. Okay, we're going to look now at applying and modifying different styles to our cells and our tables. We're still in the styles group. I can grab an individual cell, and if I click on it in my styles group, I have some different options. They're all currently normal, but if I had a concern with this cell, I could mark it to check that cell, and one of my coworkers would know that that would be something they need to do. Let's say Carol had a bad month, and I want to mark this one as bad. There are a lot of different things for you here. Maybe put a warning text here on Carol. Pull this down again. Here's my warning text. So we have some different options for formatting it, but let's just undo those real quickly because we're going to format this as a table. If I go to the Format as Table button in the Styles group, here are some predefined tables. And you can see we've got this one here. I've got to highlight the whole thing first, though. Yeah, that's another thing Excel makes you do. Make sure you've got the range that you're working with highlighted, or it won't know what you're doing, and you'll be recording a video, and you know. So I can choose some different styles. Let's choose this blue one here. Maybe I want to do this. It says, what's the data for your table? It's asking me to make sure I'm in the right place, and it says my table has headers. So I click OK. Now what it does is it creates a pre-formatted table for me, and it's also giving me these options here to help sort and to filter. So maybe I want to sort this table on January, and I want to go from the smallest up to the largest. So if I just pull down this little arrow right here, it's going to ask you, what would you like to do? Well, I want to sort it from the smallest to the largest. And when I do this, because it's a table, it's going to sort everything together, and it's not going to just sort the one column. So when I click this, you can see that it moved Ted up to the top here, and Alice up here with our two smallest. Then we have Carol. Then we have Bob. So that's another way that we can format this table. Let's come back here if I wanted to. That is ugly. So let's go back to some nice blue here. Click off it. While we are on a table, if you look, there are some contextual table tools up here. When I click, it gives me other options, some things that I can do. So if I didn't like what I had there, I could just put this on. I can also put a total row if I had one. Let's do the first column, make it a different color since it's the people's names and it's not necessarily the data that we're looking at. So you have several options. Again, this one's probably pretty ugly, but it gives you an idea of what you can do with the pre-formatted styles. So I click off of this, my contextual menu goes away, and we're ready to move on to the next portion. I've opened up a data sheet that has a little bit more information on it so I can show you this next feature. We're going to be looking at freezing the panes. You'll notice with this I have a header row that tells me information about each individual response. If I want to make sure that those don't scroll off screen, if you look right here you can see they disappear when I scroll up. I'm going to go to my View tab and I am going to go to Freeze Panes. When I go to Freeze Panes, I am going to freeze my top row. And what that's going to do is going to put a little line right there. I don't know if you can see it, but when I scroll down it's going to keep this. So now I know when I get down to line 120 that the question, do you have a social media account? Yes, this particular person. Have you used another to hide from your parents? Yeah, no. Okay, so some different information down here. I can do the same thing here when I freeze my panes off the column. So if this was maybe an employee's number, as I go off to the side, it's going to leave that first column there too. So that's one way to freeze it so you don't lose your information. If I wanted to keep more than just the first column, I can use, again here in my view group, I can use the split, and it's going to split my screen. So maybe I wanted to keep the first two columns and just this first one. So I'm going to drag this right up to here. Now what's going to happen is when I scroll, you can see it's just going to keep that there for me. I can go back in and I can freeze the panes, and it's going to keep them for me so that now when I scroll back and forth, it keeps those first two for me and it keeps the top one. So I can use a customizable width. Okay, let's look at zooming also. If I want, I can, in my zoom group, I can zoom in. It gives me some magnifications that are preset. I can go custom. I could go to 100%, which would be the normal view. And come down in my bottom right hand corner, I can zoom in this way. Okay, so there's several different ways that I can get this. If I want to go back to where it was 100%, just click here. I can also zoom to a selection. Well, maybe I need to just see one portion of it and I can't read it very well, so let's just grab this first part. When I click on zoom to selection, okay, now Grandma can read it without her reading glasses. So just some different ways that we can see our data, but let's go back to 100% so it doesn't bug me for the rest of this recording. Up next we have our friend the fill handle. You may have noticed as you select a cell, this little tiny square at the bottom corner. This is your fill handle. What's kind of nice is when you drag this, it takes whatever pattern you've already got established in the cells selected and it will repeat them. Let me show you. So I have the first months, January, February, and March. When I left click and start to drag over, it knows that I want to put April and May and June in here. And so whatever pattern it was that I have, it's going to try to repeat that for me. It recognizes it'll do it with the days of the week, it'll do it with numbers. So if I'm counting by ones, I highlight here, I grab my fill handle, pull down, it'll continue to count by ones, it'll count by twos. So anything you want to reestablish here, it'll keep going. With Bob, Carol, Ted, and Alice, there's no real rhyme or reason to this. So if I use the fill handle and pull this down, what it's going to do, it's going to just copy the names over again in that same order. But the fill handle can come in pretty handy because not only will it do the text here, but if you have a formula, it will copy that formula for you. So let's just make this a formula. That means this cell is going to be equal to B4 through G4. Okay, there's no value here because I don't have any cells numbers in here. We'll quickly add a couple numbers. And that thinks it's a date again because I've still got that formatting on there. Let's go back to general. Okay. This one should be equal to the sum of B4 through G4. There we go. Now we got it to work. So if I grab this and I wanted to get the sum for the first half of the year, grab my fill handle. As I pull down, it's going to go back and it's going to use that same formula to place them in here. So as I get Carol's sales numbers, maybe she had a good month, had a great June, back to my date problem again. Okay, so you can see it's adding these numbers in here for us, and that's the fill handle. It's pretty handy. we're going to use quarter two's data, and we're going to look at selecting different row heights and column widths and making things automatically fit. There's a couple of ways I can adjust the width of a row. If I select it, I can come to the space here between the two columns. I called that a row, didn't I? It's a column. Make this fit this way. I can make this one bigger if I wanted to. I can also double click this space and it will automatically format it so it fits just enough to make that all fit in. So if I click here, okay, so that's one way I can do it. The other way, I can right click, and if I want to make my row height bigger, it's currently at 15, let's make it 20, so we'll make Alice's row just a little bit bigger. So that's an easy way to do it. So we have the auto fit where you click between the columns and the rows. You do the same thing here. If let's make Carol's too small, if I double click, it's going to make it just big enough for her, all of her data to show up in those cells. Okay, now we're going to be filtering and sorting data. So I'm back to my bigger data set so I can have this make some sense for you. If I go to my Data tab, I have a couple options here. I can sort and I can filter. These are the ones I want to show you. With filtering, I turn this on and I have these pull downs. If I wanted to filter out, I did not want to see any of the responses from the guys. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to unselect all of the male responses. And when I click OK, all I have left are the responses of the females. Let's undo that quickly. That's helpful if we just wanted to filter them out. We can also do some sorting. We can either sort alphabetically from A to Z or from Z to A, numerically be from 1 to infinity, and then in the reverse. Let's sort, and we're going to use a couple of different levels here. I want to first off sort based on who they are. So we're going to go with the gender, and then I've had to add a different level, so I'm going to then go on their grade. And let's go from A to Z, so we're going to have females, then males, then we're going to have 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. So when I click OK, what you see is I have all the females, and then their 7th grade. Okay, then my 7th graders and my females for the 8th grade show up. Then my females for the 9th grade are going to show up. When I get to the bottom of this, it will show up for our male responses. So you can sort it that way. You can do like I was showing you, those multi-levels. Maybe I want to have their gender, their grade, add one more here. I want to move that down. So I'm going to move this arrow, pull it down. So I get their gender, their grade, and then have you ever used an anonymous site? Yes or no. Okay, so within the females, 7th grade, no, then yes. So we go female, 7th grade. Okay, it's just, that's how it's sorting it for us. So there's a lot of different ways we can use it to pull out some results from our data. And we are done with Standard 3.